I just handed Lucinda a claim for damages. I was at the last council meeting. On December 28th, my son was riding with his friend in his car, and the police illegally towed his car, and his Christmas money was stolen out of the car. So I've submitted my form for damages to the city clerk. I don't know if it was the police department that stole that money or if it was the towing company that stole that money. But I know that the police department stole my car that night and towed it to Anaheim. And they didn't have a right to do that. So I want my son's Christmas money back. So I'm going through the procedure to get it returned to our family. The Fullerton Police Department must be run by crooks, because I cannot believe how Joe Fells can be drunk as a skunk, hit and run over a tree, run over a curb, try to get away from the scene of the crime, and 3 officers show up and nobody gives them a breathalyzer. We sent a request to the Orange County District Attorney to file obstruction of justice charges against our former police chief, Mr. Dan Hughes. I've been told that it's under investigation. So we got a guy that reeks of booze, that runs over trees, smashes into the curb, messes up his car, and nobody gives him a breathalyzer. What kind of police department do we have in this community? What kind of police department sits in front of the city council and puts on this dog and pony show with a mad awards ceremony, and yet we give the city manager a ride home by the police? I wonder if they impounded his car. I didn't know anything about that. I guess it's all under investigation, so I guess we're not privy to that information. I don't trust the police. I don't think anybody in this community should trust the police, because you want to know something? They've got a track record that speaks for itself. Ladies and gentlemen, when there is no justice for those who are murdered on television in front of the entire world, and yet we have somebody that clearly broke the law that night and is protected by the one who is put in charge for $250,000 a year out of our tax money to make sure that justice is administered and the law is followed. That's a joke. And it's actually a criminal matter, because I believe what happened that night should put Dan Hughes in jail. And I don't know how Dan Hughes can be the vice president of security for Disneyland Resorts when he's engaging in this kind of behavior in his position with the city of Fullerton. I'm just ashamed of the entire process. Quite frankly, I'm pretty shocked at all of you, because not a word's been forthcoming about that evening from any of you. I mean, I guess you don't work for us. Thank you. Go ahead, Barry. Okay. We're in a public place, so we're here to report a crime. We're here to report what I believe was obstruction of justice involving the acting police chief on the night that Joe Fells had his incident. So we'd like to begin the process here at the local law enforcement agency where the misconduct of the law enforcement officers took place. We came 2 nights ago?
2 nights ago.
And I guess Goodrich tried to send officers, how do you pronounce Mr. Psycho?
Captain Psycho.
Captain Psycho, yeah. He had us try to take this offline into the DA's office when in fact this is the location where our inquiry needs to be filed. So I want to begin the process to have this law enforcement agency, number one, report to Internal Affairs the actions of the officers on scene, as well as the actions of the police chief that night. So
what I'm thinking is, this is more of a personnel complaint. Is that kind of where you're going?
No, I'm reporting a crime. Because Dan Hughes clearly is guilty of what I believe as a citizen of obstruction of justice in his involvement in orchestration of how procedure was not followed that night, and deliberately did everything in his power to make sure that adequate evidence wasn't gathered at the time that this dispatch of officers arrived on scene took place. We have a situation where 4 police officers showed up at the behest of a phone call from a concerned resident. We had someone who was clearly involved in a hit and run and smelled of alcohol, and the officers did not administer a breathalyzer. In fact, what ended up happening was Dan Hughes was notified by the watch commander, Mr. Goodrich, and Dan Hughes, by his own admission in the memo, clearly stated that he was going to make sure that he would call the sergeant, and that he would make sure that that field sergeant would conduct a preliminary assessment. So what he did is he had 4 officers out there that should have done what they were trained to do, and that is to immediately administer a breathalyzer when you have someone guilty of red-handed, smelling of booze, with a hit-and-run situation. He did no such thing. As a matter of fact, he made sure that there was a delay in the field sobriety test being administered, made sure it was done by somebody other than the 4 people that showed up. He made sure that there was no breathalyzer administered, so we wouldn't have any concrete evidence of blood alcohol content at the time of the crime. So that is the crime I want to report.
Okay. So this is fairly unusual.
Of course it is.
This whole...
Because usually when someone runs into a wall or wrecks the car or smells like booze and the cops show up, you don't get to talk to the police chief. Usually you get the cuffs.
At 1:30 in the morning.
At 1:30, usually you get the cuffs and you get the breathalyzer. If you talk back, you get punched or you get screen checked. But in this case, Mr. Fells was driven home, and he was not arrested, and he was left in possession of his driver's license, free to go drink and drive again. So that is a serious concern. But more of a concern is the level of circumvention of the process that was that Dan Yu's involvement resulted in. So that is what I'm here to report. I'm here to report a crime that took place on the night of November 6th involving case number 1674804.
November 9th.
On November 9th. So I'd like to have this written up and entered into whatever procedural protocol needs to be done so that the proper people start looking, including internal affairs, because the officers that showed up, Boline, Haight, Gilbert, and Wilkerson, should not have felt the need to call the police chief on a routine hit-and-run drunk driving suspect being in clear violation of the vehicle code. They should have administered the field sobriety test with a breathalyzer at the time, and they should have done it in the presence of another officer immediately, not delayed and wait till Santa Claus showed up. So that's kind of what happened here. So I believe these people have some culpability in this too, and I would like to see them investigated and possibly disciplined if not terminated. Because if this is the kind of treatment that we give people that are on the inside, what kind of treatment do we give to people on the outside?
Well, let me address one thing. The internal investigation into that incident is ongoing.
Of course.
As you may or may not be aware.
I am aware it was,
Okay.
one request was launched by Mr. Kiger.
Right.
I'm here to shed a little more information on this based on what my
But that investigation would have been started and ongoing regardless of personnel complaint from Kiger, which, and I know very little about any of these incidents. You seem to have some documentation with you. So what I'm going to do right now is I'll consult with the watch commander and see how we want to proceed with this, because this is, as you can imagine, a little unusual than we normally deal with.
Yeah, it's very unconventional,
and quite honestly, I don't think you're in the right place for what you're trying to accomplish here. But let me see, because it appears that you've already been here once.
Yes, I'll explain what happened. We came to file, we came to report a crime,
Right.
and we sat here for probably 30 minutes or so, maybe 40 minutes, and Goodrich was the watch commander.
Right.
And Mr. Sicko came from the side door in what appeared to be plain clothes, admitting that he wasn't on duty, and he was very nice to me. Came from the gym and said, you know, this is what you should do. You should contact, why don't you send me all your information, and I'll send that to the Special Prosecution Unit of the District Attorney's Office. And I said, well, are you on duty, and are you the watch commander? And he said, no. But he was trying to be cordial and direct me in a direction that I believe is not the proper direction, so that's why I returned here tonight.
Well, in the fact that you've mentioned all these people, Psycho is the captain. He's in charge of patrol. He's what you would call the division commander. And so, since you mentioned all these folks, it'd be prudent to me to find out, obviously since you came in a couple days ago, to find out how they want to proceed with what you're trying to do here.
With all due respect, officer, how you proceed is one thing, but you should be taking our report. That should be a given.
Well, we'll see what the captain has to say, because obviously you brought this up a couple days ago. So obviously there are probably some internal conversations that may have happened about what you're trying to do, and I want to get the answer of what we're going to do. So if you give me a few minutes,
Sure, absolutely.
Sure.
we'll come back and do that.
Yeah, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
So before I came out, the desk let the washburn know that you guys were here. So she called the captain, Psycho, who you mentioned,
Yes.
and talked to him about what you guys did the other day. So he's related that it's basically nothing has changed from 2 days ago from when you came, the process in which that he would like you to follow. He would like you to email him your documentation and your argument so that he could then forward it to the DA special prosecutor for them to take a look at it and decide where they're going to go with this. So,
Well, we're here to report a crime.
but there's not a crime to report. So in the penal code, do you have a penal code that you're looking at?
No, I don't. I did not bring it with me.
Okay, so when you're talking about obstructing the justice, you're talking maybe like a federal, something federal. You're talking about the.
We're talking about the police chief. We're talking about the police chief
Mhm.
interfering with an investigation.
Well, I don't know if I really don't think this. What's the word? I'm trying to say the right words because I know this is a sensitive issue for everybody. The chief of police was, as you were mentioned, called and woken up at 1:30 in the morning, was given a situation, which was the call out there that they were handling, and you have, and I think I saw, you may even have it, the letter that the chief wrote to the city council, where he laid out what happened, what he instructed the sergeant on scene to do. So how he obstructed the investigation, there's a lot of assumptions being made because I wasn't out there, you weren't out there. I have not seen any of the video footage.
Yeah, this is the chief's own words here.
Yeah.
Could I ask the sergeant a question?
Of course you can.
You seem to be coming from the point of view is that you don't think there was a crime, therefore you don't need to take a report. Isn't that putting the cart before the horse? We're reporting something, then you need to investigate and determine whether it is or it isn't. But to say that we can't report it because you don't think anything
Well,
a crime was committed seems to be putting the cart before the horse.
Well, I think this, and I'm just going by what has already transpired and what the captain said to do. So what I'm saying is, you've read the letter, you're here to try to report a crime. What we're saying is, this crime has already been reported. The incident already occurred. The incident that occurred out there has been documented in the police report. The internal investigation is ongoing to the actions of all the members that were involved, including the former retired chief of police. So if I'm trying to figure out, it's already being investigated. DA's office is already has already looked at the.
Well, the DA has only charged Joe Fells
Right.
in this case, and that brings up another point. If the DA had enough evidence to arraign him months later, then why didn't these 4 officers that arrived that night not have enough evidence to arrest him?
Well, that's the thing. They also looked at all those people that you're talking about. There's police reports that document everything. So if the DAs thought that the officers or the supervisor or the chief of police were obstructing anything, that they would in turn have an investigation of their own into that. So I'm not aware of that. So again, we go back to the same point of.
Well, what we have are 4 officers who showed up. A man had an accident, he smelled of alcohol, and instead of immediately administering a breathalyzer, they called the chief. The chief says, hey, whoa, guys. And this is by Dan Yu's own admission.
Right, well, whatever it says there.
They done, well,
I wasn't there, so I'm not going to talk about what they did or what they didn't do because I wasn't there.
So we
Joe,
would like,
why don't you read to the sergeant the response you got from the Orange County District Attorney's Office as to where the proper place is to report this crime?
Reported misconduct on the part of law enforcement officers should be reported to the Internal Affairs or Professional Standards section of the law enforcement agency.
Misconduct, misconduct, and that's what I was telling you. There's a difference between filing a police report for a crime and then filing a personnel complaint for misconduct. It's two different things.
Yes, and misconduct is
one
aspect of this.
What you're saying reads more on misconduct than it does a crime to report.
Dan Hughes interfered with official police business that
and that's your opinion.
Well,
that's your opinion.
That is my opinion based on my knowledge of the English language and his words in his own statement. Now, no one is looking at this probably because they're afraid to talk about it, or they're afraid of the ramifications of bringing this up, or...
Well, I think also you're in the wrong venue again, because I think the city council meetings are the venue for you to bring this up.
Well, I brought this up before, but when I believe a crime has been committed, if I were to get it between you and a suspect with my camera and interfere with you conducting your business and interfere with you collecting evidence at the scene of a crime, you would have me arrested for obstruction.
Possibly.
Well, you would. I mean, that's
depending on the circumstances,
well,
but yes.
Dan Hughes should have been arrested for obstruction of justice.
Well, I disagree because I don't.
It's not your call, obviously.
But I just disagree with what you're saying. But this is my opinion also. But the bottom line is,
Mr. Candler, I respect you're disagreeing with me, but I have to tell you that when you have somebody who wrecks his car and he smells like alcohol
and is fleeing the scene of an accident.
Fleeing the scene of an accident at 1:30 in the morning, and he's not given a breathalyzer by the 4 officers that show up. Can you please tell me that that's the proper way to handle police business?
I wasn't there.
But those are the facts.
But those aren't all the facts. That's
99% of it.
Well, I don't think so. I think there's a lot more to it than that. If you had access to the police reports, which I don't, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is 99%. But
are you a street officer?
Yes.
If you showed up at the scene of an accident and someone smelled like alcohol, would you say, "Hey, let me call the chief because he wants to talk to the chief before I administer a breathalyzer"? No, you would administer a breathalyzer and then get the guy down to the station and then talk to Dan in the morning. This was inverted 180 degrees.
Absolutely.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I understand.
Can I just make one point? We're sitting here, waiting here, and I look up at the plaques. And there's a plaque here. Jerry Hatch.
Okay, so...
Killed by drunk driver. It seems to me that Fullerton Police Department should be very concerned about this case because one of their own died because of a drunk driving accident.
So let's go back to the beginning, and what you were told 2 days ago by the Captain Saigo applies to today. So
for the record, in your opinion,
this is
not a crime. Therefore, I don't have the right to file a police report on an incident that I believe was a crime. Are you refusing to take a report on this?
Yes.
Okay.
A criminal police report.
That's all I need to get right there. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. County. I hate to put you in this position,
That's
sir,
all right.
but as a citizen, I have to go through the motions.
Okay.
And as a law enforcement officer, you have to do what you have to do so. So thank you very much, sir.
All right.
All right. Let's go, Barry.
The Fullerton Police Department is in no position to protect anybody by the way it runs its operations. Our state legislature is in no position to do what's right the way it runs its operations. The only thing we have a chance at attaining is some local control, and that's all been hijacked by phony conservatives and extreme liberals and people that are basically all on the take. I've sat here for 4 or 5 years and watched the machinations at this council. And I'm sitting here wondering why not one of you has called for obstruction of justice charges to be filed against Dan Hughes. That man single-handedly made sure that no credible evidence was gathered to put a drunk driver in jail that night. You know what? If Joe Fells kills somebody on his current driver's license up until the point where it got suspended, you would have all been in some hot water and some liability be on your shoulders. The bottom line is our crooked, corrupt police department, the one that impounded my son's car illegally and then gave it back in the morning without any questions asked, needs to be stripped down and removed and run out of this town. And nobody here seems to have the guts to do anything about what needs to be done to revive this department and turn it into something that's ethical and operating in the interest of administering the law and being just to everyone it deals with. What happened with Joe Fells is tantamount to a banana republic. It's unbelievable. The guy reeks of booze, runs over a tree, tries to get away, and nobody gives him a breathalyzer. And all 5 of you up here have not even called for any serious investigation into the police chief that night. Never mind the public records on the phone records that supposedly don't exist. What is this? I mean, seriously, what is this? Is this the United States? Or is this Cuba? It's okay for this guy to be wasted and cruise around and get a ride home from the cops? My kid makes a right, his friend's driving his car, makes a right turn, rolls a stop, and they take his car. This guy gets a ride home. And on top of that, they steal the money out of his glove box. It's got to stop. And Miss Fitzgerald, you need to go home. We're done with you.